moon landing. You're not you believe in the moon landing, right?
I used to believe in the moon landing.
You don't anymore?
I had a joke in my act about it, that before COVID, I would have told you vaccines the most important invention in human history. And after COVID, I'm like, I don't think we went to the moon.
Yeah, I know that was in your, but
Yeah.
you actually think that?
I think there is a less than zero possibility that we did not go to the moon.
Oh my gosh.
I know. Why do you think we went to the moon?
Because it's exactly what you just said about, well, there's a lot of reasons, but the main thing is what you just said about the Earth. The vastness of the conspiracy that would be required to fake that. It's so vast that it's a lot more incredible to believe that we faked it than to believe that we just went. And going to the moon, it's a massive achievement. But I think the greatest human achievement of all time. But even so, to fake it would be even more massive. Because not only would you need all of these space agencies and all the different whatever people in American institutions to be colluding, but you'd also need foreign governments, including adversarial foreign governments, who at this point certainly would know we faked it, and for some reason haven't blown the lid on it. So they're letting us like take this achievement that they know. Like, why haven't the Russians come out and said
all those things you're saying are true?
Right.
I don't argue with any of the things you're saying, but one of the things that I think you have to consider was, if it's not possible for human beings to safely go through the Van Allen radiation belts and out into deep space without much protection and face the temperatures that are on the surface of the moon, which get up to 250 degrees and 250 degrees below zero in the shadows. There's no environment there. It's hostile beyond belief. Micrometeorites are flying into the moon all the time. They're flying through space all the time. We've never had a single biological organism go out into deep space, past the Van Allen radiation belts, and then come back to Earth and come back alive, except human beings during the Apollo missions. Every single space station mission, every single space shuttle mission, all of them are inside 350 miles from the Earth's surface. The only time human beings have ever been past that and through the Van Allen radiation belts was the Apollo missions. And we were the only humans that were ever able to do that. The Russians never figured out how to do it. No one else figured out how to do it but the Apollo astronauts. And we did it 7 times, 6 successfully, from 1969 to 1972. If you said to me, do you think that they could fake the moon landing today? I would say no. I would say no. People are going to be able to track it. It's very easy. They have satellites. They're going to know everything. But in 1969, the technology was so crude that when they first showed the Apollo 11 landing, they didn't even show a direct feed to the networks. So like if you're on CBS News, you don't get a direct feed. What you do is you point a camera at a projection screen. So that's why the film looks so shitty. The camera is pointed to a projection screen where you see the astronauts jumping around on the moon. And you see this weird, grainy, third-generation image, right? And we did it, and we have never done it since. And we've always said we're going to do it, and no one's ever even come close. No one's ever even gone into deep space since 1972.
We also haven't been trying.
We haven't been trying. But we always talk about going back, including Herbert Walker Bush talked about going back, George W. talked about going back. They all talk about going back, but nobody ever gets anywhere.
Well, I think that's because we lost the spirit and hunger for discovery.
We didn't just lose that. We lost all the technology from the Saturn V rocket. They don't even have that anymore. In fact, they don't even have the original film. They erased all the original footage of the Apollo missions. So you just have copies of everything.
You could develop the technology again. You can do all that.
Sure you could. If you can get through the Van Allen radiation belts into deep space with human beings and have them safely come back.
But I think what you're describing to me, all that does is highlight how incredible the achievement was.
If they did it. Right, if they did it.
But I don't. Well, here's the main point. There's no evidence, because saying that it was a hoax is an assertion of it's not you're not just denying an event, you're asserting a whole other event that you say happened instead. And there is evidence that we went to the moon. Now someone who's a skeptic might say it's not enough evidence or it's not good evidence. There's like evidence. There's eyewitness. There's people that went and came back and told us. There's footage. There's a lot. Okay. There is evidence.
Okay.
But there's no evidence of the hoax. Like no one has come and said, "Here's my affirmative evidence that this hoax happened." It's never happened. Right, as far as I'm aware. No one's ever provided that evidence.
I see what you're trying to say. The evidence that they went to the moon, there's a bunch, right? There's moon rocks. That's one. There's lunar reflectors that they placed on the moon. That's another. And there's a couple problems with those. First of all, the Soviets put laser reflectors on the moon as well. And also the moon itself, in many places where you shine lasers on it, it bounces back by itself. The reflective quality of the moon, the reason why the moon is so bright and white in the sky when the sun hits it, there's a certain amount of, you get a certain amount of bounce back off of different things with lasers. There's some photographs that are interesting. What was it? Was the India? What was the one where they got the most high resolution photos of the lander?
I'm looking at it, Wikipedia right now, of all third-party evidence of the Apollo mission.
One of the things that's interesting is they gave a moon rock to, was it a prime minister of Holland? Is that what it was? Which one was the moon rock they gave that turned out to be petrified wood? So the Apollo astronauts gave a moon rock to some foreign dignitary, and it turned out to be a piece of petrified wood. They do have samples of moon rocks that came from the moon, but we also have those on Earth. And in fact, Wernher von Braun in 1968, I believe, went to Antarctica. There's all these photographs of him in Antarctica. Antarctica is a great place to take moon rocks because Antarctica is just this gigantic sheet of white, and you can spot the meteorites in the ground. So this is the photo. I mean, this is from what? What is this from? What is the? So this is an Indian Space Research Organization's. I don't know how to say that word. Chandrayaan-2 orbiter captured images of NASA's Apollo 11 and 12 landing sites and lunar modules from 100-kilometer altitude. Apollo 12 image astronaut boots tracks are still even visible. Due to the recent interest in another post I shared, decided to download and view the raw imagery. So that looks like there's some kind of thing on the moon.
It's pretty good evidence.
It is evidence that something's on the moon. It's not evidence that human beings went to the moon. See, we have things that are on the moon. We have things on Mars right now.
Well,
we had things that were, we'd shot things into space for sure.
Yeah, but it's evidence. It's not proof in and of itself, but it is evidence.
Listen, I'm not saying we didn't go to the moon. What I'm saying is the subject is complex. And it's not even a little complex. It's really complex. There's a documentary called The Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. This guy, Bart Sibrel, he's been obsessed. He was a guest on the show, too. Been obsessed about this his whole life and absolutely believes that we never went to the moon. And there's enough shit that you go, okay, if he's right about any of these things, it's weird. One of the things was some of the photographs of the moon, they ran through one of those AI detectors that can tell you whether or not something's false or artificially generated. And it showed different images from, I think it was a Chinese satellite of the moon. They said this is legitimate. But then it got to these Apollo images, and they said these have been doctored. This is AI.
Who said that?
This AI program that
all
they
the
ran.
Images or a few of them?
A few of them.
But then other ones were found to be authentic.
I don't think so. I think they only ran a few images through. See if you can find those, Jamie. Find what they did. Again, this is not saying that we didn't go to the moon. It could be, and this was a fact with the Gemini 15 program, where Michael Collins, there was a photograph of Michael Collins that they took in one of his training exercises, where he had those packs that they put on where they can move around while they're doing moon walks, or not moon walks, space walks outside of where they're connected by a tether. And he was like in this harness and manipulating this device. And what they had done is taken a photograph of him training, and then someone, probably some overzealous PR person, had taken that photograph and then blacked out the background and tried to pass it off as a really clear photograph of him out there on a spacewalk, which is probably very difficult to get, right? You'd have to have another person at the camera, frame it right. They had this photo. They're like, look, he did it. Let's just pass this off as the real thing, which is, you're also talking about the Nixon administration where they were just full of shit constantly.
If you remember, this is where he tried to claim it was from, which is a Russian video. I don't know.
So there's different video where they ran it through and they said it was real, and was it a Chinese program? But when they ran the American ones, the American images, they said that they were doctored. Again, it doesn't mean that we didn't go to the moon. But it does mean, okay, there's that. That's weird. Have you ever seen the Apollo 11 post-flight press conference?
Yeah.
It looks like a hostage video. It looks like a bunch of guys who don't want to be there. They look real fucking nervous, and they look real deceptive. And if you watch that video, it's weird.
Well, but I think that's the temperament it requires to do something like that.
Could be.
It's basically, it's almost suicidal to go to the
Right.
moon. And so you have to be like barely even a human psychologically to do it. So that to me is just like, and they just went through this whole experience. Well, who knows what that does to the human psyche? To even just like be in the vastness of space, even on the space station, I feel like that would change me as a person, not necessarily for the best.
But there's actually like a psychological condition that they talk about. That this sort of understanding that we're all connected. That it's like akin to a religious experience that many astronauts get when they go up to the space station and look down at the Earth and go, "Oh my God, what are we doing? Like we're all together in this thing, and we're so alone in the universe." And for us to be fighting over these trivial differences and these stupid lines in the dirt that we draw, when we are like just clinging to this ball in the middle of everything.
So then what would you say, or someone who is a full-on believer?
Not a full-on believer.
Someone who is a full-on believer in the moon hoax, what would they say to my other point that there is evidence we went to the moon? You can try to nitpick the evidence. Mm-hmm. There is zero evidence of a hoax, because that's a whole other event that would have had to have happened. There is no evidence at all, not one sliver of evidence ever, of that hoax having ever happened.
But I think that's a weird way to frame it, right? Is there evidence of a hoax of the JFK assassination that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone? Do you think there's evidence?
Well, but the event itself, being that JFK was killed, happened.
But that's not the conspiracy. So the conspiracy is, did he act alone? And is there evidence that he didn't act alone? What do you think?
I'm very skeptical that he acted alone. Yeah.
Right. But
I don't know. I don't know exactly what happened. Nobody does.
Exactly. Same exact perspective. Same exact perspective about this moon thing. Like it may have happened, but this was a time of deep deception in the American world. This is a time after Operation Northwoods. This is a time after the Kennedy assassination. This is a time. I mean, this is a weird, fucking shaky time in terms of propaganda. This is after Eisenhower warned about the military-industrial complex. This is like, there was a lot of deception. Gulf of Tonkin incident. There's a lot of open deception that the American people were being subject to. And then there's this Cold War between us and Russia, this space war for superiority. There was we wanted it so bad we brought in Nazis.
But I think, I mean, the JFK is an interesting example, but because yes, there are things that I'm skeptical of that are claimed that I don't really have evidence that the thing didn't happen or that it didn't happen the way they say, but I'm still skeptical. So I get that. But it feels different to me because the JFK assassination did happen. The question is, how did it happen? But if we're going to assert that a major historical event, probably the greatest, the most significant historical event in history, or one of them, did not happen at all, no one did it, then like I said, so what you're actually claiming is that some other thing, they went somewhere and they pulled off this hoax and they planned it and they did, like an event happened where they were faking it.
Right. And
so what I would want to see, has anybody come out, any whistleblower ever, to say, hey, I was involved in the shoot, or I'm in Hollywood, I talked to a guy who was there. Well,
that's not even evidence. You know, real evidence would be some sort of documentation, some sort of a way to go over, like there's a binary code that shows the distance between the Earth and the lunar module at every stage of the journey, but that's missing. That stuff's missing. All the tracking data, they can't find it. All the original footage is missing. And that could just be people who are really bad with historical items. That's possible. But to say that faking the moon landing would be a bigger achievement than actually going to the moon, I would say only if people could actually go to the moon. So here's the question. Can we really, everyone wants to dismiss it, can we really send a biological entity into space, go through that radiation, which is thick, covering the Earth, and have it come back alive? Well, supposedly, this is the only time people had done it. And supposedly the way they did it was by going through the top area of the Earth, where the Van Allen radiation belts, it's like kind of like a donut that covers the Earth. It's not uniform, and there's an area at the top where you can go out. But according to Bart Sibrel, they didn't go that way because you would have had to launch from Antarctica to do that. It's not really possible that happened, that they went that way. So he thinks that if they did go through that, there is no other examples of living things that have done that and come back alive. And they've known that this is an issue. They've known that this Van Allen radiation belts, which is this band of heavy radiation that covers the Earth and protects us, they've known that it's out there because they tried to blow it up once. There was a thing called Operation Starfish Prime, where they launched one of several nuclear bombs into the radiation belt to try to blow a hole through it. And unfortunately,
when did that happen?
60. God, was that 67? Maybe it was Starfish Prime. But it did the opposite effect.
Why did they do that? Just for
they wanted to see what happens.
Shits and giggles?
Well, they had so much power, and you've got nuclear bombs, and you can't blow people up, but you're still doing studies. So they're doing tests all throughout Nevada, and that's what killed John Wayne. John Wayne got cancer because he was working on a set doing a Western right next to where they were blowing up nuclear bombs. Like 200 people on the set got cancer. Starfish Prime high altitude nuclear test conducted by the United States, a joint effort of the Atomic Energy Commission and the Defense Atomic Support Agency, July 9th, 1962. So this is like while Kennedy was in office. They were trying to figure out we will get to the moon, not in this decade, but in the other, or whatever he said. High altitude nuclear tests. So the thing it did, unfortunately, was it supercharged the bands, and it made it have much more radiation. Not only that, it blew out power in some parts of Hawaii. I think it cooked a few satellites. Right? We talked about this the other day. It cooked a few satellites.
Okay, so can I ask this though? Do we have examples? So we're saying, well, we don't know if a human can go through the
right.
I would say, well, we do know because they did.
If they did.
Well, but if
we know they sent people into near Earth orbit. That's a fact. We know that.
Well, how do we know that if we don't know? I mean, maybe there's space
because
station
we actually can see that. We can see where they launched. You can follow the trajectory. You can know about the propulsion units that they used. You know about what they were trying to accomplish, and you could watch it.
So my question is, have we tried to send humans through the radiation belt and not been able to? Has that happened?
They never even tried that. They just did it.
Right.
That's what's even crazier.
So, but how do we know? So
how do we know they did it? If the only time they did it,
how do we know they can't?
The last time they did it was 1972. You don't think that's a little weird?
Not really.
No. Listen.
I don't think
even if
weird.
they did go to the moon. Let's say I'll say they went to the moon. It's fucking weird. Everything from 1969 is easier, cheaper, and faster to reproduce today, except the moon landing, except space travel.
I just don't think
but
there's
we
a will.
thought, what?
I don't think there's a will.
Do you know how much fucking resources there is on the moon? Do you know how many valuable minerals there are on the moon and trillions of dollars of things that are very difficult to find in the United States are on the moon?
I don't think the people in the 1960s, the American people cared deeply about going to the moon. I don't think that these days. I think we should care about that, but most people don't care about.
If we found out that we didn't have to dig for lithium, that we could just go to the moon and pull giant chunks of it out and not have slave labor and no one has to feel bad about using your iPhone, you don't think that they would do that? Of course they would do that if they could. If you could have a mining station on the moon, no problem at all, totally safe, of course they would do that.
Yeah. And I think
it only takes 2 weeks to get there. People mine in northern territories, like people mine in Canada in these horrible conditions, fucking freezing cold out.
But it probably takes a lot of time to get to a point where you can do that consistently.
Right, but it's so valuable.
I know.
The idea that they wouldn't do that and they haven't done anything even remotely close to that since 1972 is weird.
I agree that it's. I mean, weird makes it sound necessarily nefarious. I think it's...
No, just weird. It's very unusual.
I'd say
it's unusual technologically.
It's incongruent.
It's incongruent with technological progression. That we have that with everything else. Everything else. Phones are in your fucking pocket now, and they have more computing power than the entire cluster that they used to launch the Apollo program. The Apollo program was a fucking giant room full of computers. Your phone is significantly more powerful than that.
Yeah.
Everything else got better, except that. We thought that people were going to be going to space all the time. You ever watch that TV show Space 1999 when you were a kid?
No.
You're younger than me. There was a stupid show called Space 1999, and they thought, boy, by 1999 we'll be flying around spaceships and people will be living on the moon. Every time they've done, like in the past, like after the moon landings, every time they did any sort of like science fiction movie, it always involved like colonies already established on the moon and on Mars and people traveling, because we thought that was going to happen. Orville and Wilbur Wright, right? Think about the launch of the first airplane and then the launch of the Apollo program. It's only like 60 years. It's kind of crazy. The launch of the first airplane ever and dropping nuclear bombs out of an airplane is only like, what is it, 50 years? I think it's something like something kooky.
Yeah.
50, 60 years. That's nuts.
I agree,
But then now you have supersonic jets, like 100 years later.
Yeah.
Now you have insane capabilities of like Air Force fighter jets. Unbelievable power and maneuverability, far beyond anything anybody would have possibly imagined when Orville and Wilbur had that stupid fucking bird-looking flimsy thing. So everything progresses technologically, except...
Well, but here's what I would say to that.
Except traveling to other planets.
I would say two things. Number one, I think that it does take, yeah, we're kind of spoiled by the fact that there was this burst of incredible technological advancement.
In everything.
Right.
In automobiles.
It doesn't necessarily, not every facet of technology is going to continue at that pace forever into an infinity. So I think it does take, especially if you take a historical perspective, a longer-term historical perspective, it just takes a while to get from one thing to the next. It hasn't even been that long. I mean, 1969 was not that long ago from the historical perspective, and especially if you want to do the next thing. I mean, what's the next thing? The next thing is to go to Mars. Most people agree. That's so much exponentially farther away and harder to do.
Sure.
And so if it takes decades more to figure out how to do that, that doesn't seem that crazy to me. And the second thing I'll say is that I do think, I get your point about resources on the moon. There's a reason to go back. I agree, practically speaking, but it's just true that it requires a society that deeply values exploration for its own sake and is willing to make the sacrifices, is willing to send people off to do things just for the sake of exploration, knowing that they might die. I think we have almost no appetite for that now. Maybe the Challenger explosion was, you could point to that as the time when we sort of just, we have no appetite for people. We don't want people to die for this anymore.
I see what you're saying. Here's the problem with what you're saying. The American people don't get a say in whether or not we do things. Like, they don't get a say in whether or not we make a space shuttle. They don't get to decide whether or not we establish a new space station. No one talks about it. They just do it. Like, we barely get a say in how much money goes to Ukraine.
Yeah, but it's got to be funded.
Right, but how much is funded to go to Ukraine? Like, all of a sudden, they had $175 billion plus to fund this proxy war. And who decided that? But it wasn't the American people, right?
It wasn't, but unfortunately, but politicians are the ones who decide it. But people vote for those politicians, and unfortunately, there are a lot of Americans who are basically okay with sending money to Ukraine, which they shouldn't be. It's insane.
I agree with you. But what my point is that if you had a skillful politician who got on television and explained that we have found a solution to all of our energy problems, and it's mining on the moon, and through this mining on the moon, we are going to increase the overall way of life for every single human being on America's soil. We are going to raise everybody above the poverty level. There'll be no impoverished people, because we have literally found trillions of dollars in very, very valuable minerals. And by using our United States taxpayers' funds to fund this program and to finance it, we are going to allow the entire country to share in some of this wealth, and we're going to change energy distribution and consumption in this country in an incredible way. It's going to be beneficial to everybody, and it's going to make a bunch of people really rich too. But it's going to change the quality of life for every person in this country, and this is how we're going to do it. Everybody would be on board.
Yeah, but nobody's made that case, really.
Right, but you could make that case with the amount of minerals and the amount of valuable resources you can get, not just from the moon, but also from mining asteroids, which they're attempting to do now. If you can get people out there, if you really could get people out there. So here's the question. If you couldn't do it, if they knew they couldn't do it, but they wanted to show that they could do it, could they compartmentalize things? Could they feed a computer program that is, instead of the actual binary data that shows the distance between the lunar module and the surface of the Earth at any given time, could they just calculate that out with computers? Of course they could. Yeah, that's possible. Could they, if they couldn't get human beings into deep space and have them come back alive because they couldn't figure out a way to get through the Van Allen radiation belts and survive micrometeors and all the other shit that you deal with, could they get enough people to shut the fuck up because it's in the best interest of national security? Of course they could, especially in 1969. People were fucking terrified. They had just killed the president 6 years earlier. People were absolutely terrified of getting under the sights of the intelligence agencies. And if you have top secret clearance, if you're involved in some sort of a project, like look at the Manhattan Project. People kept their fucking mouth shut. They knew they were working on something of importance that was above and beyond their need to yap about shit.
But for the moon landing, you would need way more people involved.
I don't know
more
if
institutions
you would, because you actually have a real space program. So the space program's not fake, right? So let's just assume I'm a non-believer. I would tell you that the space program was absolutely real. The Saturn V rocket was absolutely real. The modules, the way they were able to parachute down into the ocean, 100% real. They did go into space. But how far did they go? This is the real question. And Bart Sibrel, the guy who made this documentary, he asserts that they went somewhere into Earth's orbit, like, in space, but not through the Van Allen radiation belts and not to the surface of the moon and back. And that they had video footage that they had done in some scenario. Some people think it's in the Nevada desert. Who knows what it is? But they had this footage of people bouncing around, and they said they got it on the moon, and then they brought this back.
Does he have any evidence of that event occurring? Would he say, well, I know they only went so far and came back because of this? Well,
he has a bunch of different things, and one of them is the one that's like very hotly debated, and it's the different light sources in the photographs. So a lot of the photographs from the surface of the moon have intersecting shadows. So you have a shadow that's going this way and another shadow that's going that way, indicating more than one light source or a close by light source that's, coming in, not something that's, millions of miles away like the sun. There's those. There's the photographs. There's the photographs that run through AI. He has this other video of what looks like them filming the Earth through one of the round portal windows with everything blacked out in the cabin. And then they pull down the things that were blocking off the other light sources, and the cabin floods with light, and it looks like they're in near Earth orbit. And it's very confusing because you're like, well, what is that video? What exactly is going on there? Because if they really are in deep space and they really are filming this small image of the Earth because that's all they can see from 200,000 miles out, well, why, when they take those things down, does it look like the whole cabin is filled with light? Why does it look exactly like they're in near Earth orbit?
But that still goes back.
Have you ever seen it?
The specific.
You want to see it?
Sure.
For shits and giggles. Yeah, because we're in the middle of this stupid conversation. It's a fun one. It's one of the most fun of all conspiracy theories. Because if they did it, wow. First of all, if they killed the president, wow. And it seems like they kind of did that. So if they did this too, like what else did they do? Like what other hoaxes were played on the American people if this is real? I'm saying it's real. But it is a fun one. It's not as simple as the Earth is flat. That's a stupid one. But this is a fun one. This is a fun one because you're dealing with the kind of power with complete control over the media, complete control over newspapers and what they reported, the interest of national security, the Cold War with Russia, the space war with Russia. We wanted it so bad. We brought in some of the most heinous human beings that have ever lived to run our NASA program.
Yeah. It's not as dumb as flat Earth, but it does remind. To me, it reminds me of. To me, it's in the vein of like Sandy Hook was a hoax.
No.
Well, I'll tell you why.
That's heinous.
Not morally.
Let me show you the video. Okay. Jamie, you got that? Funny thing happened on the way to the
I
moon.
know, but I can't.
Is he hiding it? I know it's available.
Sure. I'm not even. I have to figure out exactly what the video is I'm looking for.
Proof.
I know, and I'm digging through. I pick a video, I try to find it. It's not in there. I have to find another video. It's not like.
Okay, you'll
unless I know
find
the
it.
exact name of the video. It takes a second.
Okay, you'll find it. He'll find it once he does. Again, I'm not saying we didn't go. I'm saying this is a fun one, and it's a weird one. There's a lot of weirdness to it.
Isn't it similar? Okay, because a lot of this comes from it's such an incredible feat that's so difficult to do that it's hard to believe anyone actually did it.
Sure.
Which I can understand that mentality. But the thing is, you can go back in history and you can look at, for the sake of discovery and exploration, you can look at what other men have done hundreds of years ago that arguably is more impressive than going to the moon.
Like what?
I mean, you name it. Like take any famous explorer from like the 1500s to the 1800s, and whether it's Magellan or James Cook or Christopher Columbus or any of them, what they were able to do navigating this vast ocean, going to play, having no modern technology at all, being able to go from where their starting point, hit some little tiny island somewhere, and then go around and navigating a world that they don't even know what it looks like. They have no maps. They have no GPS. They have nothing at all. I cannot conceive of how they could have ever done that. I don't know how in the world, not knowing what the world looks like, having no map, having no GPS, having no modern navigation whatsoever, how in the world could you possibly get on a ship launching out of France or Portugal or wherever and make it anywhere across the ocean? How could you? I don't know how you could do it.
It's incredible.
But
it's incredible.
But we know that it happened.
Okay, it's incredible, but it doesn't compare because they do it now easily. So anybody can get in a ship right now and travel. You can get in a small boat that you have enough resources and you have enough gas and you could travel through these routes. You can do it.
It took them hundreds of years, though.
But you can do it right now. So it's way easier to do now, right? So it's something that they did that's incredible, no doubt, no argument. But something that could be reproduced today easily. Or at least possibly. I wouldn't say easily. It's a task.
But it also took centuries to get to the point where it could be easily
But it got better right after each one did it because they had maps now. And then they also used their sextants, and they understood constellations in a way that most people don't today. And sextants are, if you actually use them correctly and you understand which way the tides go and which way the water currents are going, which way the flow is happening, they had a deep understanding of the currents of the earth. They knew travel lanes, and they knew which ways they could go with ships. So applying that to the open ocean, applying that to these continents they weren't even sure were there, it was very iffy, very dangerous, very courageous. But once they did it, then everybody else could do it easier. And then they started doing it better and better. And then people started coming to America, and then and now here we are. And now anybody can get in a boat. Anybody with enough resources can have a boat that can travel those routes. No one can just say, I want to go to the moon today and get their private moon craft and fucking shoot off into the atmosphere and land on the moon. So no one's done that since 1969. That's a recent occurrence in terms of like human history, but not technologically. The technology from 1969 is not even, it's like cave people shit compared to what we have today. So you really can't compare the courageous, amazing deeds of these early explorers, because what they did was absolutely fantastic. But they left a clear record of how to do it, and then each person improved upon it, and now it's easy to do.
But it was still, I mean...
The spacecraft travel is not. There's nothing like that.
I would say 100 years from now,
perhaps,
check in.
maybe.
Christopher Columbus was 300 years before James Cook, I think. The technology they were using was not that different. It was pretty similar. It didn't progress that fast.
Well, they had maps. They had maps and they had sextants and they had a detailed, at least crude understanding of the shape of certain continents. Like there's maps from the 1500s, there's maps from before that. There's plenty of maps that are rough estimates and pretty good job, actually. The cartographers back then were astonishingly good because it was so valuable to be good at that. Now, this is the footage. So let's just watch this. So this is Neil Armstrong talking to Houston. So give me some volume.
Another segment. All
I don't think we can do that.
Why is that?
The We're now watching the movie.
All right, so let's do this. He and I will watch it with the sound on, and we'll tell everybody else to just go to the website or go to the YouTube video. So we don't get pulled off of YouTube. We'll watch it and we won't say anything, and then we'll after it's over, we'll come back. So play it because I want them to hear it.
Air after review.
That's enough. So what do you think about that footage?
I mean, it's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm at a slight disadvantage because I'm going to assume that people have addressed some of those issues and have given responses to it. I'm going to assume. Like if I went to YouTube right now and looked up that video debunked, people have probably done
I'm
that.
sure someone has.
So I don't know what their response would be. So it's interesting. I just don't see it. So to me, I listen to that and I think, well, that's interesting. I look into that to figure out what. The first thing I want to know is, okay, here's your claim, the claim they're making. I need to know what is the official narrative, let's say. How do they respond to that? Because I know they do.
Right.
So I need to know that.
Well, here's two problems with that video. One, the English accent. Those motherfuckers. If they want to sell you something on late night TV, they use an English accent because it makes someone look more intelligent, more sophisticated. The crescent insert. Why would they fake any of it? And then they got you with the music. The music is manipulative. So they're manipulating you in two ways. They're manipulating you with the woman's voice, and they're manipulating you with the music. The music.
Wait, so you're saying they are manipulating you with the video?
I'm saying they most certainly are manipulating you in that video. That video is not just the video. So what I would rather have is just the video and watch that. But we do get to see them say the distance they are from the Earth. Here's a couple of questions, right? What does it look like? What is the shine from the Earth from 200,000 miles out? And maybe in order to be able to film that, you have to block off the light from all those other windows because even though it's 200,000 miles out, just like the moon lights up the sky on a night where there's a full moon and you're outside, you can see. Like a really good full moon with a clear sky, you can see the ground. It lights it up. And the moon is 1/4 of the Earth's size, and the moon is 250,000+ miles away. So if something is 4 times bigger than the moon and the blue from the Earth's oceans, like when you see it from the space station, it is powerful. I mean, it is a potent reflector of sunlight. So you could say that he's just ignorant about how much reflection you would get from the surface of the Earth from 200,000 miles away. And even though they are filming it by blocking out all the lights and filming it through this window, that actually is the Earth. That's actually what it looks like when you're in deep space. You could say that too. You just don't know. And it's hard to figure out what's what. It's hard to figure out what's what. But when you see a video like that, you just go, okay, what is that? And I don't think it's impossible to fake people going to the moon. I think it'd be very difficult. It would require a lot of people to be on board. But I also think it could be compartmentalized. The people that make the rockets, what you're doing is you're making a specific part, and this guy's making another part, and you have the engineers put this thing together, and you launch this thing into space. The people that would have to know are the people that are actually charting the trajectory of the Apollo mission. The people that are actually talking to the astronauts and explaining to them what to say during the press conference, the people that are engineering the whole thing. And you could probably get away with doing something like that with a few hundred people. And you could get a few hundred people of high-ranking people that have top secret clearance keep their mouth shut.
You could. I would need some kind of solid evidence of that to believe that it's true. And
yeah, me too.
This to me, there are some things that we call conspiracy theories that I think are, clearly true. There are some things that we call conspiracy theories that I think are maybe true. But there are conspiracy theories that to me are just that. They're not even theories really. They're just kind of like fanciful, projections. And the ones that I don't find convincing are where they usually start with, there's a so-called official narrative of a thing that happened.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of things about what actually happened that are kind of weird. And we look at that and go, that's a little bit weird. And then the conspiracy theorists in that case, they come in and they find these little tiny cracks, if you want to call it, and then inside the cracks they shove this whole like Hollywood cinematic narrative that they have created to explain what's actually like a pretty tiny crack. You don't need this whole thing to explain that. So with the moon thing, I mean, one of the first sort of weird aspects of the moon landing that I think started kind of the conspiracy theories about it was the flag, the fact that the flag's moving in the picture. And so, yeah, it's like when you look at that, you don't really understand. You look at, well, that is weird because there's no wind on the moon. But then you understand that, okay, if, for example, when you put the flag down, it creates reverberations. It makes the flag move. It's going to move for longer because there's no gravity. So there's an explanation for that. But if you're the conspiracy theorist, then you take the flag moving and you're like, nope, the whole thing is bunk.
Have you ever seen the video footage of the astronaut hopping by the flag, and the breeze of him hopping by makes the flag wiggle? He doesn't touch the flag at all. The flag is completely stationary, and the astronaut hops by the flag, and as he hops by the flag wiggles.
Okay, are we saying that wouldn't happen on the moon?
No, it wouldn't. There's no air.
Yeah, okay. I haven't seen that.
We'll show it to you. It's weird. Listen, what you're saying is entirely correct. Everything you're saying is entirely reasonable and correct if they actually can get through the Van Allen radiation belts. If they can, this is stupid. This whole thing's stupid. But if they can't really do that, and they never have done that, and the only time they say they've done that is these missions, it gets real weird. And since they haven't done it since then, it gets real weird. And it's not just that. There's other video footage. It's not just the one where the guy's hopping by the flag. It's other ones where it looks like they're on wires, where they're being pulled up, where they fall down, they're being yanked up. The whole thing is weird. There's a lot of weirdness to the footage. The physics don't line up exactly the same. If you go to the early days of the like Apollo 11 footage, and you look at the difference between when they were playing golf and jumping around the moon, they move different. They cover more distance. It's like it looks different. They got better at it. They get better at filming it. They got better at whatever they're doing. And then there's the other question. Maybe they actually did do it, but the cameras weren't able to handle the radiation, and the film, which, you wouldn't even be able to send your film through the radar detector at the airport back then because it would get fucked up. You'd have to put it aside. Maybe the radiation space fucks up the film, so even though they did do it, they show you recreations or show you these test runs that they did, and they film it because the actual film footage is impossible to obtain. That's possible too. Hasselblad, who made the cameras, didn't put any special protection in these cameras. There was nothing about them that was unusual that would be able to withstand that kind of radiation and that kind of heat of deep space.
Yeah.
Steve, do you have that one where the guy walks by the flag and he hops around and it wiggles?
I typed that in and it's not really popping up, so I'm not sure which video.
We definitely have played it before.
I know, but if you take a look, that's what's popping up. It's not that one, I don't think. Is it? It's not a
plant flag. No, that's not it. What did you write? Astronaut flag.
Wiggle, moon. Nope.
Type in astronaut hops by flag. Flag wiggles.